That's right. Thank you so much, gents. Now, from athletes to watch out in the field to parenting news this morning. Now, in the lives of today's very busy parents and their children, grandparents are indispensable for so many reasons. Now, this morning, we chat to our creative parenting expert, Nikki Bush, about the special relationship and benefits to children having grandparents in their lives. Nikki, lovely to see you again. How are you?
Thanks, Ewan. Fine, thank you.
Good. Welcome. Nice and early this morning. So let's talk grandparents. I grew up with my grandparents and I had a very special relationship with them, and it was magical and I loved it. But what role do grandparents play in the lives of our children today?
Today's grandparents are actually more involved than ever before because so many parents are working full-time. In fact, many grandparents are sometimes co-parenting. Sometimes even the custodial parents in broken homes, in child-headed households, they're taking over that role. So it doesn't matter where you are in society, grandparents are becoming such an indispensable part of a child's life and a child's development because they have a lot of input because parents are not as present as they used to be. And let's face it, grandparents have a whole lot more time, usually, but of course there are many grandparents today who are still working because people are working for a lot longer than they used to before.
Absolutely, yeah.
But it's such a gift and it's such a special relationship between a grandparent and a grandchild. It's a different kind of relationship to that between a parent and child.
Let's talk about that roles and the different roles that the parents play and that the grandparents will play.
Let's face it, parenting and the parent-child bond is quite complicated often.
Yeah.
It comes with loads of hopes and dreams and expectations. And often grandparents have the luxury of just being present right now, of just being able to focus on that child in this moment without having all that baggage that comes with everyday parenting.
Yeah.
You know, they can give the children back at the end of the day. They don't have to take, like, this long-term responsibility that parents are having to carry, which means they're actually often more fun to be with.
Absolutely. And I always say grandparents are there to kind of spoil the children, do things out of the norm that would happen in your own household.
Yeah, absolutely. So they can push the boundaries just a little bit.
Yeah.
And I find that they can be a great sounding board, especially if they've been very involved in the upbringing of children. They can be your first port of call if you want to just check in with a second party. What do you think about little Johnny or little Susie or, Bongani? Do you think this is, he's showing these tendencies, or what do you think about his social skills? Because they can often give you that input. And it's that extra listening ear too. When something's going on with the child, to give them the job of, can you find out what's really going on here?
Exactly, because they're more likely maybe to say something or do something, So in light of that and linking into that, how can grandparents help children feel a little bit more secure in their environments, and maybe with regards to the school, something happened, but really grandparents can be there?
So grandparents are a little bit like an anchor, and because they have more patience and they generally have a little bit more time, they're sometimes a little more reliable, as in the children can rely on them to pitch up and be there. And I always think of my neighbor. I watch him, granddad, walking his grandson up to nursery school and back. He has the time and the patience to walk slowly with this 4-year-old, to talk, to listen. He's not rushing this child, and I can see it in this relationship. And I just have this visual of them holding hands and walking down the street.
You almost want to put a thought bubble there and put something profound.
Like, isn't this awesome? What a lucky child.
I think it's brilliant. Nikki, thank you very much, man. I think when it comes to the relationship between, parents, their children, and grandparents, it's such a unique kind of dynamic that needs to be nurtured, I think.
So I was very lucky to have a granny until she was 93, and my children had a great granny.
Yeah.
And I just always remember her, it's that undemanding, unconditional kind of love.
Yeah. It's
a very precious kind of bond and relationship. And she was there for every birthday ring for my children for many years. You had granny, great granny, and mummy. So they were very fortunate.
The whole generation.
Very fortunate.
Nikki, thank you very much, man. I can't wait to talk a little bit more about that special bond between your children and grandparents.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Back now with our parenting expert and author of Tech Savvy Parenting, Nikki Bush. She's been hanging out this morning. I hope you've enjoying your time this morning. Had a coffee or two or three.
It's been so entertaining at the back there, and I've been playing with all the pooches, the doggies. They've been so gorgeous.
Taking those moments in between. Love it. Thank you very much. So we're talking about the important role that grandparents play in the role or in the lives of our children. So just quickly to link on to our previous discussion earlier on this morning, let's talk about the roles quickly. Just recap that for us, the role that parents have and the role that grandparents have.
So obviously parents are involved in the day-to-day upbringing of their children, and they've got all these hopes, dreams, anticipations and expectations of their children, where grandparents have a slightly less responsible role, shall we say, in terms of bringing up children. They can give them back at the end of the day. But there are three things about grandparents that are really important. They have more patience, they have more time, and they are usually less stressed than parents. And that means the nature of the relationship is a lot more often warm and fuzzy, as opposed to with parents where it can really flick from one to the other. So they have a very special place in children's hearts.
Absolutely, and why you should nurture that relationship. So how can grandparents go about helping preserve traditions and special family kind of gatherings maybe, and just carry that forward and instill that in the young ones?
Well, I love watching things like MasterChef, for example, because they're often, you know, the contestants talk about being inspired by a recipe from grandma. And so grandparents, because they have a lot more time, and there are those traditions that have come through from one generation to another. Here's a family recipe. You know, those sort of things come through. And also things like perhaps decorating a Christmas tree, that they have old ornaments that the children always take out, and there's a specific day when you go and you decorate Granny's tree. And children love those little traditions, and they're often things that they will take on and do with their own children. And grandparents also share stories of the history of the family that maybe parents didn't know, even stories about their own children that they tell the grandchildren. You know, when your dad was a boy, he was really naughty.
Despite your dad saying, it's like, I was a good boy growing up. Grandparents, they play such an important role. We've established now over the course of this morning as well. But I know that a lot of schools out there also honor grandparents by having grandparents' days. It's happening out there. But what in the event of a child not having a grandparent close by? I mean, how do you bridge that gap now? Because it really is such a special moment.
It is a special moment, and of course, because we don't have families necessarily living geographically close together, some children will be without their grandparents for various reasons, obviously. I myself have been invited to many grandparents' days as a substitute. So sometimes what schools do is they rename Grandparents' Day Special Persons Day. And that means that it can be anybody who is special to you. So for schools out there, that's an option. But otherwise, you often get the opportunity to send somebody special in place of grandparents. And you can choose anybody, or your child can choose anybody. Just make sure your children know that they have lots of other special adults in their lives. You know, and grandparents provide that extra layer of comfort and security. And we need to keep adding to that, that basket of people who make our children feel safe, secure, nurtured and loved.
Absolutely. Nikki, thank you very, very much. Always a pleasure hanging out with you on your Feel Good Breakfast Show this morning. Go and have another coffee.
Thank you, Ewan.
You're more than welcome. Listen, go out there, and if you are lucky enough to still have your grandparents around, especially for the children, make sure that you do nurture that relationship. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back just now.